What happens when a team decides to make quarterbacks uncomfortable for a living and then keeps doing it week after week until the stat sheet looks like a headline from another era? Picture Empower Field on a typical cold Denver night. The lights are bright, the crowd is wound tight, and the defensive line breathes in like a predator. That's where this story starts. A stadium that has become a pressure chamber and a defense that's learned to turn panic into points. Through 10 games, the Broncos have 46 sacks. 46. That number is loud. It's the kind of thing you feel in your chest before you see it on the scoreboard. You don't get 46 sacks from luck. You get them from an identity. The Broncos are not a group that waits politely for mistakes. They manufacture them. Nik Bonitto, Jonathan Cooper, Zach Allen. These names are popping up like chorus lines in opponents' nightmares. Guys who used to be entries on scouting reports are now the nouns of a sentence the rest of the league keeps repeating. Hurry him, hit him, make him think twice. There's an electricity to that. When a pass rusher flashes upfield and the pocket collapses, the stadium reacts like it's been sparked. A gasp, a chant, a swelling feeling that something important just happened. It's easy to romanticize sacks, to replay the highlight, rewind the hit, share the slow-motion splatter of a quarterback hitting the turf. But the real magic is subtler. Every sack is a nudge at a quarterback's certainty. It's a half second that forces a decision. Throw now, or hold and risk getting smacked? That little hesitation ripples through an offense. Routes are shortened, timers change, playbooks get rewritten on the fly because someone had the courage to push the pocket and force an answer. The Broncos aren't just collecting sacks. They're reshaping how opponents think. And yes, it's historical. Those 46 sacks are the most any team has had through 10 games since 1990. That's not a random footnote. That's a sentence that begins to read like a potential chapter in the record book. Talk in the locker room shifts. It's not just winning this week anymore. It's asking what a season could look like if this keeps up. The 1984 Bears set a number nobody expected to move. 72. If Denver keeps their current pace, they'd finish north of that. Imagine that. A defensive unit today haunting a record set in an era whose legends are still whispered on Sundays. That's the kind of thing that turns players into stories and seasons into lore. But for all the romance, there's a ledger to mind. The Broncos' offense hasn't been flawless. Bo Nix did enough to win against the Raiders, but the points were scarce and the yardage slim. Defense can paper over offensive stumbles for a while. It can flip a low-scoring game into a win when the other team keeps hurting itself. But football seasons are long, and fatigue is patient. When your defense is on the field a lot because your offense can't sustain drives, those sacks start to feel like taxes. They add up, and eventually someone will need a break. That's why what the coaching staff is doing matters as much as the lineman's technique. Rotations are everything. Snap counts have to be managed like precious cargo. You can't get greedy with your best pass rushers and expect them to be fresh in December's playoff air. When a defense chases a record, the art is in keeping the unit dangerous and not depleted. Denver's coordinators have to balance the hunger for historic numbers with the practical need for a consistent rested unit when the games really matter. And let's talk about the human element. Because these aren't stat-collecting robots, they're people who've built small economies of trust. Bonitto brings speed and timing, Cooper brings the gnarl of technique, Allen brings the steady, veteran presence. The beauty of the Broncos' rush is distribution. This isn't one superstar taking all the bows, it's a team-wide effort. That matters. When opponents can't simply double one player and neutralize the rest, the problem becomes maddening. You can scheme for one edge, but when pressure comes from everywhere, you have to decide which fires to put out and which ones to let burn. Records also change the sound of the city. Fans start counting sacks in a way they never counted them before, not as an occasional highlight, but as the main event. The noise in the stadium morphs into rhythm. Every third and long, every blitz call becomes a beat in a song the crowd knows by heart. It's contagious. Young players feed off it. Veterans smile wider. The franchise feels like it's doing something right in the most elemental sense. Winning ugly and teaching a culture to love the grind. Of course, there are skeptics. Some will point out schedule quirks, a few offensive lines dinged up here, a rookie quarterback there. Some will say the weather has aided the rush or that a stat line magnifies because of the way opponents play. Those are fair counters, but numbers don't exist in a vacuum. And when a team performs like this across multiple games and multiple opponents, you have to accept the pattern. This rush isn't a fluke, it's a thesis statement. And a thesis, if it holds, rewrites expectations for the rest of the league. The tension now, the real narrative cliff we're staring at, is the November 16 game against the Chiefs. That's more than a fixture on a calendar. It's a test. Kansas City still has one of the NFL's more dangerous offenses. The Chiefs' line is a measuring stick. How Denver approaches that game, rotation, game plan, snap management, will say a lot about whether this sack pace is sustainable and whether the team can blend historic pursuit with playoff pragmatism. Win that, and the Broncos don't just keep piling numbers. They earn the narrative that they're built to win when it matters most. Beyond football, there's a market angle. Players who perform in this way don't just get praise, they gain leverage. Contract talks resurface. Opposing teams update scouting reports and budgets. Suddenly, Nik Bonitto's phone rings with questions from analysts, general managers, and perhaps future suitors. Success breeds attention, and attention reshapes careers. That's practical and human. These are men whose livelihoods shift with a sack or two, and the reality is that greatness often has commercial echoes. But I want to end with the image that explains why we care. Imagine the last minute of a cold December game, two teams breathing heavy, one drive left for the opponent. The defensive line lines up, a crowd holds its breath, and the quarterback drops back. He looks right, then left, and then the pocket folds like a house of cards. Someone grabs an arm, drags a body down, and the stadium erupts. It's ugly, it's loud, it's decisive. That moment is what the Broncos are building toward. Not a spreadsheet, not a headline, but the raw, unfussy moment where a play ends everything. This season might end with a record in the books. It might end with a unit that only promised so much. Either way, what Colorado is living through right now is rare. A defense that's not content to be steady. It's insistent, relentless, and hungry. Records are numbers. Culture is the thing that outlives them. The Broncos aren't just chasing a stat. They're building a way of playing. And if history remembers them, it won't be for the final tally so much as for the kind of team they made to get there. You remember pass rush? The Broncos just reminded the whole league what it sounds like. Right out of the gate, Denver's defense now has 46 sacks through 10 games. The most any NFL team has posted in the first 10 games of a season since at least 1990. And that number jumped after a 6-sack night versus the Raiders. If that pace holds, we're talking about a projected 78 sacks over 17 games, which would shatter the long-standing 1984 Chicago Bears mark of 72. This is not fluff. This is pressure as policy. Reuters, how do you build something that terrifying? First, personnel. Denver isn't a one-man show. Nik Bonitto is a full-time problem for offenses. He's right near the top of the league with 9.5 sacks. Jonathan Cooper is consistently finishing plays, and Zach Allen has been wrecking timing up the middle. That trio, plus a healthy rotation of interior linemen, blitzers, and smart stunt packages, means quarterbacks are facing a fresh threat on virtually every dropback. When three guys can legitimately win their matchup on any down, coordinators start losing sleep. ESPN.com. Second, scheme and detail. The Broncos have turned pressure into an identity. They stunt, they twist, they disguise, and they rotate so the rush comes from different angles. It's one thing to have monsters on the edge. It's another to design an ecosystem where interior push collapses the pocket and edges simply finish. That's coaching plus film discipline, not random luck. The result, consistent pocket disruption, more hurried throws, and sacks that compound into turnovers and short fields. Third, endurance. This isn't a hot 2-game streak. Denver's rotation keeps legs fresh. They sub in rushers with pace so pressure doesn't fade in the fourth quarter. That's why their per-game sack rate stays high. Offenses can survive a burst of heat. They can't survive sustained, smart pressure that forces the QB to make decisions quicker than his feet and eyes can react. Opponents have started to change game plans against Denver. Quicker releases, max protect calls, more screens, more rollouts, all band-aids that only work sometimes. Let's be real. Projections assume consistency and teams adapt. Some Week 13 opponent will throw max protect at Denver and force shorter throws. Weather, injuries, and officiating all nudge the numbers. But even with that realism baked in, the Broncos have already done something remarkable. They've forced other teams to rework the way